is Rob Herrick. I work here at the Social Change Project at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. And I'm very excited about this afternoon's speaker. Giancarlo Ibárgüen is the president of Universidad Francisco Marroquín in Guatemala, and he's been a member of the board there since 1992. He has served on the board of Centro de Estudios Económicos Sociales, on the advisory board of the Society for Philosophical Inquiry, as chairman of the 2006 organizing committee for the Tolerant Society General Meeting in Guatemala, and as vice president of the Association for Private Enterprise Education, as well as many other distinguished positions. He is the founding collaborator of the magazine Intuition, and has written on economics and telecommunications for such publications as Libertas, Telecommunications Policy, and the Wall Street Journal. Mr. Ibárgüen holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Texas A&M University. His talk this afternoon is Guatemala, First Steps Down New Roads. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Giancarlo Ibárgüen.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's really great to be here. At Universidad Francisco Marroquín, we have great admiration for the Mercatus Center and for so many of the great institutions that surround George Mason University. So it's really an honor and quite an opportunity. And today, Ricardo Castillo, the provost of the university, we've been working hard all this week trying to bring some awareness of what Francisco Marroquín University does and what it means and why we believe that in many ways Francisco Marroquín University has a unique model that can be offered to the world, and we will try to bring this message across today. Marroquín University is, you can see here, our campus. We're in Guatemala City, in a wonderful ravine, right in the middle of the city. So if you're staying in one of the nicest hotels in Guatemala City, and many of you have been there and they can attest to what I'm saying, you're 5 minutes away from the best hotels of the city. You don't know it because you don't see it. It's not up above in a hill. It's down below in a ravine. And when you get there, you get surrounded by nature right from the beginning. When our president founder had the vision of purchasing these properties, he also had the vision of being very careful with nature, taking care of as many of the old trees that were there as possible. And that's why the campus is so spectacular. You'll see a few pictures of that today. We have friends all over Latin America and a very aggressive program of visiting professors. This is Carlos Aveeno. He's an author. He is a world traveler, and he has lived, he was born in Argentina. He has lived most of his recent decades in Venezuela. And now we're fortunate to say that he is a resident professor at Marroquín University. And this is what he has to say about Marroquín University. He says, the work of UFM, Universidad Francisco Marroquín, or as we can very comfortably say here, the University of Free Marketeers. You will not forget that. And if you remember that, you'll remember our website, ufm.edu. You don't need anything else, just that. University of Free Marketeers.edu. The work of UFM, because it has been faithful to its mission over the decades, generates a point of reference in the ideological landscape of Guatemala. Like a great river or mountain range, something everyone has to take into account, whether they like it or not. And what's interesting about what Marroquín has been able to accomplish in such a short period of time is not only being quite influential in Guatemala, but throughout the region, and even outside of the region, and we'll tell you a little bit of stories that maybe you've heard of. And some of them we were just learning about them this week, and we'll tell you about it, if I don't forget, in a little while. How was Francisco Marroquín University born? Way back in the 1950s, Manuel Ayao, who had been studying engineering in the United States, who had lived in Canada, who had lived in the U.S., who was, trying to make ends meet while he was studying at the university. He had all sorts of works and activities when he was studying at LSU. And he even though he was studying engineering, at that time he was, interested and had a curiosity about economics. He took a course in economics. But when he traveled back to Guatemala, and when he met people in Guatemala, well, they may look different from the people that he had met in the U.S., but they could have basically the same conversation with him, the same ideas, business ideas, opportunity ideas, but he saw a big difference somewhere else, outside in the world. He saw that even though Guatemala is a country the size of New Jersey, but quite different to New Jersey. We have over 30 volcanoes in our territory. So you can imagine that the landscape is very different from New Jersey. So Musso, who we all call him Musso, Manuel Ayao, he goes to Guatemala and sees this huge difference in wealth. And probably one of the most important things one can do in life is to ask the important questions and the good questions. And one of the questions he asked himself is, what explains the difference? Why is the United States so wealthy compared to Guatemala? It's true, the United States is a large country, but Guatemala is a small country with a lot of resources, a lot of diversity, and wonderful people. So why the difference? And the economics course that he had taken here in the U.S. did not explain that. And he was, inquisitive and thinking about it. And happily, a friend of his brings him a pamphlet that had been originally published by the Foundation for Economic Education, a pamphlet written by, nonetheless, Ludwig von Mises. And by the way, if you look at our campus, lo and behold, we have a Ludwig von Mises library, which is a beautiful building. So Musso reads this pamphlet. It was Mises talking about the labor markets and how rigidity in the labor markets becomes a drain on the economy. When he read that, he says, well, finally, I read something that at least partially explains to me why Guatemala is so far behind, at least compared to the United States. And we have had a very bad labor code since 1946. There are many things to say about that. Unfortunately, CAFTA has only reinforced the labor code instead of the other way. And you can imagine that the labor unions here in the US had a lot to do with that. Well, anyways, when Musso was reading this pamphlet, he was not thinking about all these, free trade or all that, but this little pamphlet opened up his eyes. And Musso thought, well, I need to meet the people who published the pamphlet, I need to meet the author, I need to learn more. So in the late 1950s, he decides to visit the Foundation for Economic Education, the institute responsible for publishing originally that pamphlet, because most would have read it first in Spanish. It came via Mexico, translated via Mexico through Agustin Navarro, who had done this job of translating the pamphlet. So Musso reads it, he visits the Foundation for Economic Education, he meets Leonard Reed, he meets the wonderful people who were related to Foundation for Economic Education, and of course it was an eye-opener. And it was a very early on eye-opener, if you think about it. And it gave him enough energy, enough ideas to return home, and with the help of his friends, they found that in 1950, it says 1959, but it's actually, they started working on this in the year 1958. What eventually became sort of like not a mirror image, but a small mirror image of the Foundation Economic Education in Guatemala, called Centro de Estudios Económicos Sociales, CES. Both Ricardo and I were members of the board of directors of that think tank, which exists to the day. And what did he do with his friends, colleagues? They're all businessmen, remember. Well, they started translating a lot of the stuff that came out of the Liberty Fund and the books that they were reading. I'm pretty sure that most of the stuff was being translated and published without copyrights, but heck, who cares? the ideas needed to be, to be given to Guatemalans, needed the ideas. So the group started growing in the sense that more businessmen became interested in the ideas and were helping the think tank. They were able to get enough funding to invite Mises to Guatemala in 1964. A little later, Hayek, Kirchner, and they even invited Louis Derhard from Germany. So, you know, there was a lot of things going on surrounding this little think tank of businessmen who were getting together to read. The first book that they read together, who would like to guess which was the first book group? This group of 8 businessmen were reading every week, twice a week sometimes. Theory and History of Mises. And they were not only reading it, but they were translating it, and then they went on to other books, of course, and they eventually became very well read, but all self-taught. And they noticed that with their contribution with the think tank, the biweekly pamphlets, the conferences, the radio interviews, and the op-eds, they were, you know, starting to get the ideas across, but they thought it was not enough. They thought that they needed to do something else. And that something else turned out to be, well, why don't we find a way of educating the intellectual elite, and I repeat, the intellectual elite of Guatemala. And Hayek had told the story to Musso of the model that the Fabian Society had used in Great Britain, and how Great Britain, from being the bastion of free enterprise in the mid-19th century, became the bastion of socialism a century later. And if you could trace many of the ideas back to the London School of Economics, because it was founded by people like Sidney and Beatrice Webb, because they had the conviction that that's what Great Britain needed. The future of the world was socialism, and that's where the intellectual elite of Great Britain should be learning about. So with that model in mind, and I have to tell you that Musso had already had his own sense that he had to work in a university even before he had this conversation with Hayek in the 1950s. But he wasn't quite sure what needed to be done. He thought he knew it was education, but not quite sure what it needed to be done. So that was something that really influenced Musso. The model of the London School of Economics, the model of the Fabian Society, and the socialist ideas, but of course, in quite a country, quite different direction. So, out of those conversations, and after two failures, they had knocked the doors of a couple of universities in Guatemala, and they said, look, we know that your economics department is doing very bad, you're losing money, you're not doing a good job. Why don't you let us take control of your economics department? You will forget about the finances, we'll take care of that. Unfortunately, all the universities said, no, we don't want you here because we know how you're thinking, you're pretty weird. This is not what, we don't want anything to do with you. Which was fortunate, because it then forced them to not only think about capturing a school, an economics department at a private university in Guatemala, but founding their own university. And that's what happened in 1971. Universidad Francisco Marroquín was founded by Manuel Ayala, was president founder, and this group of incredible Guatemalan businessmen who had, this vision, this idea of bringing the freedom philosophy to the intellectual elite of Guatemala. The picture you see here is of the central garden of the campus area. This is the academic building, and this is the Ludwig von Mises Library. And right below this amphitheater is where our students sit when they're right about to receive their diploma. It's a wonderful ceremony. We had a ceremony on Saturday, and we gave an honorary degree to the Cuban writer Carlos Alberto Montaner. Maybe some of you have heard of him. He's the co-author of, I think it's been translated into English, I don't know, the Perfect Latin American Idiot Manual. Or you can think about it, you can imagine all the stories. It's a wonderful book, by the way. I think it's the Manual of the Perfect Latin American Idiot. It's a very good book. And I think it's available in English. And there he is, Carlos Alberto Montaner. And this is what he has to say about Marroquín University. When UFM was founded, statist, populist, and Marxist ideas were converging in a huge wave of followers in Latin America. Sometimes armed, sometimes peaceful. In a country that has had as much violence as Guatemala, what they did takes on a level of personal risk that is almost heroic. When in the 1970s, Musso, as president of the university, had to move about from one place to another, instead of hiring, bodyguards, he used his smarts. He, for instance, would wear, what do you call this? Pelucas? Wigs, mustaches, and run on a bicycle, on a motorcycle. Let's see how all of a sudden he appeared, and there was Musso, and nobody knew about it. Well, there was a time he even had to use an armored car because he was also a member of the Congress in Guatemala, and he had been, receiving threats. So yes, what Carlos Alberto Montañez says about Musso and the people who were involved early on is very true. Well, it's not only true; it's tragic. One of the members of the Board of Trustees was killed during that time. A number of others were kidnapped, and an even larger number of other families were also subjects of kidnapping. So it was terrible times, and it took a lot of courage and a lot of conviction to continue doing what they were doing at Marroquín University in the 1970s. And this is the mission of the university. It's been part of the genetic structure of the university since it began, even though in the format that you see it today, was not actually written down until the year 1996. And this is what it says in all our websites and documents. It says the mission of Universidad Francisco Marroquín is to teach and disseminate the ethical, legal, and economic principles of a society of free and responsible persons. Did you notice something? It doesn't say we want to graduate medical doctors, dentists, psychologists, educators. It doesn't say that. Well, what it does say is we want all the students at Marroquín University, doesn't matter what kind of profession you decided to study, to understand what freedom means, to understand free markets. The university is managed quite differently from, I believe, from other universities. It's a private, non-profit university, and it's structured in the following. I actually want to make sure how long we have until 4:30. And the Q&A is usually half an hour? Okay, so there's that. So maybe I should go into some detail into this, because it's something that we believe we have the correct structure, but maybe you can help us make sure that we have the correct structure, because we want to make sure that Marroquín University sticks true to its mission, not 10 years from now, but 50 years from now. You've all heard the story that if Henry Ford would be reborn today, and if he looks at what has been happening with the Ford Foundation, he would die right away. We want to make sure that when Musso is reborn 50 years from now, 60 years from now, he will want to keep on pushing the idea at Marroquín University. Now, this is how the university is structured. First of all, we have a board of trustees made up of 50 people. Not all of the time do we have 50 people participating in the board of trustees, because it depends on whether or not we find the ideal persons to belong to the board of trustees. We believe that the university should be headed always by entrepreneurs or professionals or people who are earning their living outside of the university. And that's idea number one. Idea number two is, out of this board of trustees structure, which meets about 4 times a year, the members of the board of trustees elect for a period of 5 years 5 directors. So these are all directors representing the board of trustees in the executive board, which receives the name of board of directors. And they're all, remember this, they're all members of the board of trustees. And it is these 5 directors who elect the president, the vice president, and the secretary general or provost. And there you have it. It's a board of 9 people, of which at least 5, or a majority of them, have to come, actually 6, and I'll tell you why. These 6 come from the board of trustees. Because also the Board of Trustees elects directly the treasurer of the university, who is also a member of the Board of Trustees. So you have 5 members of the Board of Directors, the treasurer, and then president, vice president, and provost. So there you have it, so 9 people. And this board meets every other week. It's a pretty intensive job if you accept to participate at this Board of Directors. But it's not only intensive job, but you get paid nil. It's pro bono. And these are all businessmen. And we meet on Wednesdays at 7 a.m. So you can imagine that by 9 a.m. they want to rush back to their business and get, bring some money to the table. So that means that the structure of the meetings are different than when you have all the resources in the world, all the time in the world to think about things that maybe shouldn't be thought. So that's how Marroquín University is run. It's, I think, a different model from the usual way or the usual manner most universities are managed. If you have a question about this, it'd be interesting to hear it right now, so that we could, regarding the structure of the university. Because I gave you I started with a premise, and that we're hoping that this model will make sure that the university will continue doing its job 50 years from now.
Well, neoliberalism is always going to be under attack because it has to do with entrepreneurship and accumulation of wealth and keeping that wealth, and that's not around the world historically that is not a popular idea. And the same thing with freedom. Allowing to say what you want to say. Those are ideas that are constantly under attack. I mean, if you go back to the Ottoman Empire and you look at the Greek nation states that spoke of individual freedoms, I mean, the Ottomans crushed that. And if you look today at terrorism, and it's not going to end. It's not going to end. Neoliberalism is always going to be under attack, and partly because of its failures, but partly because it's really a very demanding way to live.
I agree with you. The question is, do we have at Marroquín University, and I really believe we do we have the governance and the institutional structure to make sure that we will continue fighting those ideas 50 years from now? Because the market will be there. I think the market for ideas, the battle for ideas will never end. And I'm presenting this point to you with a big question mark, because it's something that is very important to us, because we want to make sure that we will continue, that the university will continue with this job. Carol?
I guess a question that I'm sure you thought of was the following. Francisco Marroquín is very familiar with organizations like FEE and some of the other classical liberal organizations in the U.S., and you will know then that the board of FEE and some of the other boards tend to become quite old over time. So there's a need to be making sure that younger folks are coming into the system on a regular basis. So I guess I would ask you, how do you ensure that younger business people are introduced to the system? In a way, you do it because you're educating them. So you might graduate them from the school literally into the governance structure for the university. But that, I would think, would be a challenge, that over time you have an aging board.
That's one of the reasons the Board of Trustees is so large, so that you can get a pool of people who will be willing and able to participate in the Board of Directors. When Musso began this tremendous project, he tells us the members of the Board of Trustees, most of them had no idea what classical liberalism stood for. What they were doing is they were supporting this guy who was very smart, who was very funny, and who, it was trustworthy. So that's how he started. But today, fortunately, the number of people, just because of what you mentioned, who have been educated at Marroquín University or elsewhere, the members of the Board of Trustees of Marroquín University could come from George Mason University in the future. But from that pool of people, we will be able, hopefully, to maintain, Board of Directors that deeply understands, that is deeply committed to the mission of the university. Peter.
Hi. It's good to see you
Good
here.
to see you too.
I have a question about the sort of the pushing forward, sort of the ideas in the following sense that we know that in delivery of education services, for-profit entities, for example, just pure like education issues, like the University of Phoenix might be able to compete with many other organizations, and they don't have tenure, and they have a lower cost structure, and they don't invest all as much in the sort of physical plant that like we do in these other kinds of universities and whatnot. And I would go even further. I mean, Jim Buchanan, in a wonderful essay called "Economics as a Public Science," says that we as a profession invest too much in esoteric puzzle solving and not enough in, as he puts it, the repetitive and boring business of teaching the principles of economics.
Well, we are in the repetitive, boring.
Yeah,
business.
this is my question though. But how do you balance that with the desire to ever increase the reputational capital of? We know as economists that studying education that education is actually the least valued output by the students themselves of what comes out of a college education. It's right. It's not the training, because they could get it wherever. So that you could go to Grove City College, where I went to, or you can go to Harvard and you study the same books. So it's not that. It's the signaling quality that goes with education, and the mating quality, that who you become your network with, and that's a function of the reputational capital. And reputational capital of schools is built by research.
Well,
Right, by the fact that you have so many Nobel Prize winners, that you have so much stuff like that. And so the question that I have in these things, as we build up over time, and we look at an enterprise like down at UFM, and you guys are conferring doctoral degrees now and doing this kind of stuff, is how do you ratchet up that aspect of it to maintain the international reputation without also making it so attractive to faculty, in the sense of like the kind of things are not just salaries, but also sort of the amenities that go with the salaries.
That's an excellent question, Peter. And let me tell you that we've seen with Ricardo and the board hundreds of ideas and proposals that would want to take the university in that direction. But then we have a simple solution to that, and it's that we're humble enough to recognize that we're in the boring business. We're in the teaching business, and that's all that we do. And it's in our statutes. And up until today, every single member of the board of directors understands that. And not only don't we don't have tenure at Marroquín University, but the contract for the professor is 6 months long. So there's a professor who is insisting on this. Well, we will have to be with him, bear him for 6 months. And now, well, you say, well, what am I going to do there? No, this is true. But we have had people like Armando La Torre, who has been at Marroquín University, he's a former Jesuit, a philosopher, great classical liberal, and a wonderful teacher. He's been there for a whole period of time that Marroquín University has existed, almost, well, just except 2 years. So we have that now. I see your point, and I think that will be one of the incentives that we will have to work continually against. Because, I mean, almost every week or every other week we get a proposal like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things we say, look, we recognize that we're a teaching university, we're not a research university. And it's in our statutes. And you see letters coming from my office saying, we will not do this because this is a teaching university. Done.
Yeah, just disagree just a little bit with Pete. Well, not totally, but there are some universities, even in the U.S., who have built up good reputations because of being good teaching universities. Williams, a lot of the top liberal arts schools, and they still have a structure closer to that of a traditional U.S. university than UFM, with faculty relative to tenure. But, and maybe this is just a question back at you, John. What's the reputation of UFM throughout Central America? I don't want to put words in your mouth, my understanding is that it's very high, and the reason it's very high is because students know that they will get a first-rate education there, and that then, of course, creates its own kind of positive signaling effect.
If you allow me to continue with my presentation, I'll answer your question, and then maybe later on we can get to the other questions that you may have. We're pushing for entrepreneurship all over the university. We have, I don't know, 8 different programs at different levels of the university, where we opened up, for instance, and I know that there have been cases that this institution has not been doing a good job at promoting free enterprise ideas, but when we saw the opportunity, we grabbed it. It's students in free enterprise. And this is, get young people to work out an entrepreneurial, sort of like a social concept, but they start understanding, what it takes to build a business. We brought that to Marroquín University, and with all the Marroquín, free market seal of approval. And it's working very well, but not only in Marroquín University, but at the National University, the Jesuit University, and 2 Evangelicals University. So it's working pretty nice. And we have, of course, many other entrepreneur programs. We have every year, we invite about 600 high school students from the best schools in Guatemala, and they get the chance to visit our campus. Of course, we're promoting the university there in a subliminal manner, but they're also listening to an interview with successful entrepreneurs in Guatemala and what they have learned, not only from their successes, but from their failures. And when they hear these personal stories, they can identify themselves with that, and hopefully will impinge, and those that have entrepreneurial ability will impinge on them to become the future entrepreneurs of Guatemala. It's really a wonderful program. About a month ago, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
And how did we do it? Well, of course, Atlas Shrugged is not required reading at Marroquín University. We just wanted to create as much noise as possible and make certain and create a grandiose sculpture that will be there 50 years from now. And it has a citation from Atlas Shrugged. I'll show you the website. Of course, let's see if I can get there. And it's in English as well. We have a citation there from Atlas Shrugged. And this is just to show you that we accept donations. No. It's to show you that we have a gallery there of photographs, and you can see how this sculpture, it's a relief sculpture that's 12 feet by 12 feet. And you want to read the citation that we have, I will not read it now, I will not waste time with it. Go ahead and visit our website, and you'll find Atlas Libertas at ufm.edu, and you'll find Atlas Libertas. Go there. It's a pretty inspiring quote. And of course, I'm one who believes that this novel should be read, in high school, and that's what we're doing. Oops. That's what we're doing. We're trying to start a project with a couple of Guatemalan entrepreneurs. This novel has just been translated fully into Spanish about 5 years ago. Before it was censored, so it was only partially available, and all the sex parts were taken away by the Franco government. Really? That was the censored part, not the parts that had to do with freedom. Which is interesting. So we're trying to bring Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged to the high school, because Marroquín University is a small university. We're only a little over 2,700 students strong. So there's so much that we can do. And by bringing these ideas hopefully to the high school level, maybe in the tens of thousands, which you already have the money to do it, we'll have some contribution there for young Guatemalans. One of our honorary degrees is Mario Vargas Llosa. He has an extraordinary quotation here about Marroquín University. Leonard Lijo is also one of our honorary degree recipients. And of course, Walter Williams and Vernon Smith, and many of the people from George Mason, we recognize their value. And this is one of the ways we get that reputation. We don't graduate Nobel Prize winners. We don't hire Nobel Prize winners. We give them honorary degrees. And that helps, really. Now, how do we teach these principles to the students at Marroquín University? Boy, time's running. We have our own Henry Hazlitt Center. And there, the Henry Hazlitt Center is sort of like the brains of the whole picture of what we're doing with the mission of Marroquín University. And that's where it brings together all the professors that teach the 3 economics courses that all of our students have to take and the two social philosophy courses that all of our students have to take. I mean, there's no exception. And if, for instance, you're entering into Marroquín University at the graduate level, we have the same set of courses, more heavy format for those who did not take their undergraduate courses at Marroquín University. So then everybody takes, all the different schools have to take these 3 courses in economics, and what it is really free market economics. They read a lot of stuff, of course, from the Austrians, a lot of stuff from Milton Friedman, a lot of stuff from, a little bit from public choice. And then in the social philosophy courses, what we do is we go into more in-depth into what it means to live in a free society. So think about it. I mean, you have a university where every single student has to go through the same course load. I think it's a model worth, copying the world over. And I mentioned earlier that there were some initiatives to copy Marroquín University, which we just learned, for instance, in the Republic of Georgia. The Ministry Cajas, he wants to build a Marroquín University there. Inspired by what Marroquín University has done. And you can imagine that, for us it's great to hear that story. And in fact, we would love to see as many sister universities as we could, because that would be good for Marroquín University as well. We understand that. The University Andrés Marroquín went to in Africa, even though it's not fully inspired in this conceptually, they did use as a point of reference 3 universities. It's Assisi University where Andrés Marroquín was. And it's a university in Hong Kong, a university in Costa Rica, and of course a university in Guatemala, and you can guess which university in Guatemala. And we didn't know about this until Andrés Marroquín got there. And he told them that he had, those are the things that can happen with the internet. And what we're working out right now, we're trying to build a package so that if you're visiting us from the Republic of Georgia and you tell us, look, we want to found a university, we will share that with you, pro bono. Why? Because we believe in ideas, and we did something that would be worthwhile, and it'd be great to have sister universities, as I said just before. And that's one of our main purposes during this visit has been to give this message, bring this message across, that Marroquín University is sort of like this unique model to promote liberty around the world. And it'd be great for us to have more Marroquín universities all throughout Latin America. We just had an election in Guatemala. It's true, the guy from the left of center won. He's a businessman. We had quite a Pinterest, quite colorful electoral process. We had, our noble laureate, Roberta Menchú, who said a lot of things, who is more famous internationally than nationally. And she comes from the far left. But not even Roberta Menchú, not even the guy who won, not even the guys from the right. Nobody was really saying any bad wording or bad mouthing private property, the markets, or even for that matter the United States, which in a way reflects in Latin America what capitalism is. We know it isn't today, but in the image of the Latin Americans it is. And we, I believe, that one of the reasons this happened during this electoral process was thanks to the help of Marroquín University. I'll show you later how Marroquín University has been able to move public opinion in this, sway public opinion in this way. It's quite interesting, I think.
Giancarlo, I don't see math, I don't see mathematics.
We don't have a mathematics program per se. But we used to have an engineering school, but that engineering school we spun out a university outside of that, coming out from that engineering school, became a Galileo University. Let me just move a little bit more quickly here. Those are some of the texts that we use. One of the things that we do to earn the trust of the community is that on our website and publicly, we define what we understand academic excellence to be. We have a definition, and it's made publicly. And we tell this to prospective students, and our students know that, so that whenever they're reading this document, and if we're failing at it, they'll show it in our face, and they'll say, look, you promised this and you're not delivering. So that's sort of like, we're earning trustworthiness with this document. I will not read it, but It's actually, we don't have a full document in English, available in English, it's just an extract. But we will have it soon because it's a wonderful document. We first define academic excellence, then academic excellence, then what we mean by academic excellence for the teacher or the professor, academic excellence for the student, and we have done a good job. These would be what we have, the results of our job. I guess most of you know or know of Andrés Marroquín or met him when he was studying here. I don't know how many of you knew him, but when Andrés Marroquín, he came from a very poor family in the western part of Guatemala, in the mountain region. But he had an inquisitive mind from early on, and every book that he could grab of, he would. And when he finished school near his home place, he thought, well, I should study at a university. He didn't know where, so he goes to Guatemala, he gets money, borrows money to go to Guatemala to look into different universities and look at what their admission process are. And he was interested in seeing if he would be admitted at a private university. But he already knew that if he was admitted, it was just only to test himself and say, well, this is wonderful, now I got to go to the national university because I cannot pay for the private university. When he did the scholastic aptitude exams at Marroquín University, his scores were so high that he caught the attention of the dean of the Department of Economics and the whole team there. And they said, well, we got to meet this guy because this is a wonderful resource. So they meet with Andrés, they have a conversation. And when he says, look, I just wanted to test myself and I wanted to see if I would be admitted. Now that you're telling me that I would be admitted, what a shame, I got to go, bye-bye. They said, but they said, no way, we will not let you go. And fortunately, and that's how this full scholarship program got created, which we call ITA, which in Spanish means Impulso al Talento Académico. And what we do there is that we offer the best of the brightest from the poorest families, a full scholarship program. We find them a place to live. Remember that we don't have dorms. So we have to find them a place to live. We have to find clothing for them. We have to purchase their textbooks. But on top of that, and this is something we learned by making mistakes, we have to give them a monthly stipend. Because if we didn't do that, their families would call them back and say, look, it sounds great for you to study, but we need to bring bread and butter to the table and come back and work. And that happened actually in the very beginning. Fortunately, it didn't happen with Andrés, but it happened with some of the other guys who were more or less in the same age group. But we're very happy with this program because it's a program that not only gives an opportunity to a bright mind, but we have seen, not in every case, but in a good number of the cases of the people who have received this help, they have become, not only very successful academically, professionally, or entrepreneurially, but they have a drive and love for liberty. So that's why we want to increase this program. It's something that's very important for the university. We've had so far 76 ITAs, students, which is not a large number, but our aim with Ricardo is to eventually have 100 concurrent ITAs every year at Marroquín University. And it costs us about $15,000 per student. So if you do your numbers, it's a lot of money. That's one of the reasons we've been here. We're looking for help here in the United States to help fund this wonderful program.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, Peter.
How have U.S. helped, over the years? Earhart Foundation, things like that. We've been Liberty Funds, whatever. That's one thing. And the other thing is, what's the relationship between Marroquín and the networks down there? So, for example, SAADE and other organizations. Is there a tight working relationship of sharing of faculty and one other?
Oh, definitely. We, with SAADE, with many of the other education institutions that are more like think tanks than universities, we have a relationship. And this is something that you have to give the merit to Musso, because with the publication of the pamphlets of Sayes in the 1950s and 1960s, he got the message across not only in Guatemala, but throughout Latin America. And the first SAADE was not in Argentina. our graduate program in business was named SEADE, starting in 1973. And who was managing that early on? And who was there at the time? Alberto Bernardin's son. And then when he goes back to Argentina, he brings the SEADE idea to Argentina. So there's already been, ideas outflowing from Guatemala from a long time ago. So yes, we have a close relationship with all this group people.
And how about the funding?
The funding,
from like US?
yes, we've been able and fortunate enough to get funding from people like foundation like the Earhart Foundation, and we have, and that's part of my presentation here, but let me mention it right away. We have a co-sponsor agreement with Liberty Fund, and Liberty Fund is helping us fund. We began with 8, now we will have 12 colloquia a year
In Guatemala.
in Guatemala at Marroquín University. If you multiply that times 15, for those of you who have been at Liberty Fund colloquia, that's a large number of Spanish-speaking scholars that we're bringing to Marroquín University and bringing in to the network of Marroquín University. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's a great program, really. And and it's a relatively recent program. It's just been going 3 years. We're running now until our 4th year. But with that, short period of time, we've been able to influence tremendously UPC, a university in Peru. We've had good number of their economics department professors participate in this program, and we're bringing all these ideas back to Peru, so it's wonderful. Let me skip this. You have to read this. This is one of our ITA, full scholarship students, Oscar Chiquito, who was born at a town not far away from Guatemala City. This is what he said. I already read it, huh? I started working when I was 5 years old. My father would wake me up at 3 every morning to help him in his cabbage fields. You're not going to study, my father would tell me. Studying is for people who are lazy. And today Oscar is a Fulbright scholar at Texas A&M. And my goal is to help people improve their lives, to understand that development lies in their own and not to depend on government. So this is a wonderful success story and a wonderful guy. Let me skip through this. Last year we began a program which we call Explorations on History. We believe that it's very important, not only for our students, but for the Guatemalan community to have a better understanding of our history. If you do a Google search on Guatemalan, recent history, what you will find is terrible. I mean, it's a completely biased history. And unfortunately, that's the history that we're bringing to the high schools in Guatemala, and that's the history that many students that reach the university read. And we want to change that. Carlos Aveeno published this year that's the guy I quoted at the beginning. He just published a book on recent Guatemalan history, which gives a completely different perspective from any other book that has been so far published. He did a wonderful job. He was doing research for over 4 years just on that topic. And it's helping us, I think, create a different vision of where we come from, which will help us build a much better future. Part of this program includes a digital reconstruction of the lienzo de Cuauquecholan, which what it is it's a large cloth, very large cloth, that was painted by the Mexican Indians in the 1530s. And up until about, less than 10 years ago, everybody thought that it was telling the story of the conquest of Mexico, and lo and behold, it's telling the story of the conquest of Guatemala. Where you had the Spanish hand to hand with the Mexican Indians, giving trouble to the Guatemalan Indians, or the people who were living in the territory. So it's a different history from what we have learned. It's a little bit more complicated than having just the Spaniards conquering your country alone, doing the whole massacre. No, they had the continent. The Spaniards were just a relatively small number of people. They needed the help of hundreds and thousands of local Indians to go and continue their conquerings. So that's the type of thing. And we did this digital reconstruction. We wanted to bring the original to Guatemala, but we were afraid that if we did that, we have a very bad preservation law in Guatemala that maybe the government would say, okay, nobody will take this back to Mexico. So we said, no, because the original is in Puebla, Mexico. 11,000 students have visited El Lienzo since we started the exhibit, which is a good number for any museum, private museum. And of course, along the way, and again, the subliminal message, Universidad Francisco Marroquín, if you're a good student, we want you here. No matter how young you are, that we want you to start thinking about Marroquín University. We also have a wonderful webpage, a virtual tour really of the campus. We have an inventory of the flora and fauna of the tropical forest of Guatemala City. It's a beautiful website. I recommend you to see it. You can see what type of flowering we have from January to December, what type of animals, and we have a whole record and pictures taken by professors and students. We also, this year, were lucky enough to be the recipients of a wonderful donation. I don't know if Don and Carol remember the Casa Pope. No, that's part of Marroquín University today, and it's a beautiful old colonial house in Antigua Guatemala. One of the things we plan to do is to do part of the co-sponsor agreement we have with Liberty Fund, to bring all of you professors that want to visit in the future Marroquín. There will be a place for you to have Socratic dialogues in Antigua, and so it's a wonderful setting. Yeah, it sounds terrible. Yeah, Well, we'll keep you in Zone 1 of Guatemala City. This is I already told you about. That's Andes Marroquín, where you spoke about. What has sprung out of Marroquín University? I think that'll be interesting for you, and with that I'll finish just a few more slides. In 1983, a new think tank was born at Marroquín University called CIEN, Center for National Economic Research. And what it does, it brings to the table public policy and proposals. It's it's politically active, and it's been very helpful promoting how to translate the ideas that our students are learning in the classroom and how to translate that into public policy in Guatemala. We've also had quite a few grassroots movements born out of Marroquín University. Do any of you know Steve Antush? Well, he was an American. He lived in Guatemala for a little while, and I think he's been here sometime. I don't know, maybe some time ago. That's why you don't know him. But he helped us form Association for Local Power. What it does, Apollo, is to promote government decentralization. And it started in 1990, and it has been very influential. All of a sudden, because of the work of Apollo, the consuls and mayors of the little towns of Guatemala, they understood that they had a lot more power than they thought. So that's been a good thing to decentralize power in Guatemala. Liga Pro Patria, which champions victims and denied fundamental individual rights. They actually go to court, helping people. Pro Reforma, which is this is a new pet project of Musso. What he's trying to do is to bring up about a referendum, a constitutional referendum, and it'll be a yes or no vote. And the proposal is to modify the Guatemalan constitution, basically using the Hayekian constitution model, and trying to translate that into the Guatemalan constitution. It'll be a yes or no vote. And he's getting, people sign in. He's giving conferences 3, 4, 5 times a week. And along the way, of course, he's teaching. He's continuing his teaching. And it's a wonderful project. I believe that one of the good things about the results this Sunday in Guatemala is that this will gain more momentum, what Musso is doing. So can you imagine if we were successful to do this? If we were not, it doesn't matter, because along the way you were able to educate a lot of people on why the Constitution is important and what the rule of law means. In the year 2001, and there we were fortunate enough to have James Buchanan, who also has an honorary degree from Marroquín University, help us found the first public choice center in Latin America. It's named CADEP, and it's very active. One of the things that CADEP does, which is part of the success of Marroquín University, is that it started running an inter-university seminar. I mean, Don has been there, right? And what it does is every year, students from 6, 7, or sometimes 8, depending on the year, universities listen to public choice idea. And not at Marroquín campus. They hear some of the lectures at Marroquín campus, but The other lectures are at their own university campus, so it's a wonderful mix of students and ideas. If you open up the newspapers in Guatemala every day, about 35% of the op-eds can be traced back to Marroquín University. That's a huge number, either because they are students or professors. So that's wonderful. And that I think helps explain the story I told you before on why this election process in Guatemala was different from anything else in Latin America. Two universities has been born out of Marroquín University. One, the first one I already told you about, Galileo. The other one was the Salesian. We used to have a Salesian program, and that became a whole new university. There are many reasons why that happened. It's all been good for the new universities and for Marroquín University. But probably the most important story here is that one of the things that Musso and the founders of the university had very, very clear from the beginning was that we should remain a small university. Because part of the quality here is also making sure that you're selecting the best students that you can. Because you can have the best professors, the best teachers, with the worst students, and they'll be bad professors. Anyway. So we're very careful in our selection of our students. And in order to do that, you have to remain small. And every year we have more students that want to come into Marroquín University, making our selection process more difficult, but at the end, more effective, because we're able to select the best of the students. What reforms could be traced back to Marroquín University? Now, keep this in mind. The university as an institution does not get involved in politics. And that's also in the statutes, and it's very important. Unlike many universities in Latin America, which they do, especially many national universities, they get directly, personally, institutionally involved in politics. We were afraid that if Marroquín University would start doing that, we would lose sight that our job is to teach, not to play politics. So what has sprung out of Marroquín University? Exchange rates were freed in 1989. You can trace that back to Marroquín University. Interest rates were freed in 1989. International trade will help get a common knowledge that import duties are bad and that international trade, free trade, is good. We also have, this is a very interesting case, in 1993, we had a constitution, so we already have experience with constitutional reforms or referendums. In 1993, there was a referendum, and among the referendum was a clause to prohibit the central bank to loan money to the central government, and that's in the Guatemalan constitution. The telecom sector, which was liberalized in 1996, and it's been very successful. The reforms to the electric sector have not been that successful, namely because there was this proposal that was on the table, and the American embassy, unfortunately, brought a terrible proposal that came from South America. I'll reserve the name, but it was fixed a little bit in the end, but not enough. So it's in a crisis, almost crisis situation, the electric sector in Guatemala. But you should be aware of that. In the year 2001, the same year that El Salvador dollarized its economy, we passed through Hayek's competing laws. So we have that. So actually in Guatemala, you can legally have a contract, do a contract in gold. And it's legally, and you can go to a court and say, no, our contract is in gold and you have to pay me what you stated in gold. And it's free competition of currencies, which is interesting. There's a case study that should be interesting to study. Peter.
I want to ask you an earlier question about
go ahead.
Telecom, which is Wayne Layton. Whatever happened to his work, his study? Did you guys publish it, or?
Oh yes, yeah, it'll be published in it's a Journal of Law and Economics, Berkeley.
Yeah.
It should be already. Soon.
The Berkeley. The Cougar Journal.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Did you know that, Jim?
I knew there was one version of it that was in, I think, Journal of Comparative Economics, or it was under review there or something.
It's been out as well, but this is the Hazlitt, Layton, Ibárgüen paper.
Yeah.
I only put my name there because the two guys were the ones who were working. It's a privilege of being in the Guatemala.
So that one's coming out in the Berkeley?
Yeah, it's coming out in the Berkeley, yeah.
And that's what, congratulations.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm proud of it, really.
Explain to me, well, my eyes sort of were a little playing tricks on me, because when you had the Ayn Rand thing and then the contributions thing, I thought it said that you could pay in gold, but then I realized it was a
No.
gold member, a silver member, or
Not
whatever.
a bad idea.
Yeah, not a bad idea.
You wanna-
You guys are way ahead of your time. You know. But so what is the deal on this reform on creating currencies, and what actually have we seen? Is it dollarization? I mean, what's going on?
Part of the economy has dollarized voluntarily and legally, but what's interesting is to compare, for instance, the level of interest rates between El Salvador and Guatemala. How the term of the loans. You know, part of the problem we had in Guatemala before this law is that most of the loans were very short term. But not as soon. It took a little while. The markets had to learn. It was not an immediate reaction, but I mean, I would say about a year after the law was enacted, less than a year really, you started seeing, you know, longer and longer term loans that were related to investments that were being done through the banking system in dollars or even other currencies that could be matched to a longer term. I mean, they would not be afraid of losing, you know, the value of money in time.
I think
We
we
haven't
need a
done-
Francisco Marroquín in the United States.
Pardon me?
I think we need
Yeah,
some
I think so.
UFMs in the United States.
So isn't it amazing to see all the elimination of price controls, elimination of rent controls, and I mean, we could put names and faces to the people who were behind these, and they had a relationship with Marroquin University. They were either students or professors. So that's why we're saying this model should be exported else. I mean, the world over, to try to get this. The more examples we have like this, the better off we'll all be who believe in this idea. That's still far away. But that's probably one of our main failures. But it's because we have so much international. It's not an excuse, really. It's not an excuse. But we have a lot of international pressure on labor legislation, and it's one of our weakest points. And it's one of our weakest points that I think all of the indexes of economic freedom do not get. In fact, they're overrating us. I would put them much way below because it's really bad, unfortunately. Yeah, there was a code for protection of children which was promoted by the United Nations, supposedly in defense of parental rights. We are in defense of the children's rights, but what it was is it was a complete war against parents' rights. And we had a group of people related to the university, including Caio, were pushing for no, this is not right. So it's not only the things that have been successful and have become policy, but so many times that we've been able to stop really terrible, bad ideas. Most of them imported, unfortunately, through international organizations. I think we already went through that, and that's only if you wanted to go into more detail. I think we could start more of a conversation right now. Okay. So, thank you. Yes.
Could you say how do you create student demand for UFM, and what's the competition of other higher education institutions in Guatemala?
When the university started, the competition was very little and far between. That's not true today, fortunately. I mean, that's even, and I think it reflects on the job that Marroquín University is bringing to the table. The education law in Guatemala at the university level, not at the high school level or elementary level, but at the university level is pretty much classical liberal law, except for one. It has a little bureaucratic entry process, but to the extent that we can influence that the decision, Marroquín University always says any single project for a new university should be welcome. Most welcome. We love the competition. I think it's great. And we have now over 10 universities in Marroquín University. When Marroquín was born, it was the fourth private university in Guatemala. Now there are 10 universities and more to come. So it's getting pretty competitive. And of course, you also have now the competition that comes via the internet, which is growing all over Latin America. I mean, and you still have bureaucrats that are saying, oh, we should regulate this, we should regulate that. They have no idea that that's been going already for quite a few, quite some time. It's great. Now, there was another part of your question.
Yeah, so how do you attract it? In a competitive market like that, what are you saying that attracts the students to come to UFM?
Well, I mean, the academic excellence we promised, we deliver. And they know it. I mean, we have the reputation, and the community knows it. So that attracts the best students. And the process is so well known that we have also people that, young people who say, I wish I could go to Marroquín University, but I know that if I go through the selection process, they will not elect, and they elect themselves out. They self-select themselves out. So we do have a reputation. And now that's a continuing job. It's something that could be lost, of course. So we have to be always on our feet.
Just a quick question. In the U.S., there's a debate about the cost of education, especially higher education. I guess it can be argued that it has gone up over the last 20 or 30 years. It's more and more expensive to get a degree, and part of, there are many, explanations and theories about this, and I'm no expert, but part of that, one explanation I have heard of is that education is delivered on a non-profit basis, and there is no for-profit or not enough for-profit going on in the world of education. And actually, Pete was mentioning the University of Phoenix, which is for-profit and delivers services, educational services at very low cost, and is doing a great job doing this. So, considering your background, why are you guys a non-profit, and can you tell us more about how you manage your costs and all that stuff?
I asked the same question to Musso. And, and I did because for the same reasons. And what happened is that when Musso had the initiative of the university project, the only way you could start a university in Guatemala is through a non-profit. Now, that's true today, but there have been some legal changes that have allowed some groups, and Galileo would be one of them, that you have sort of like the non-for-profit phase, but everything behind it is sort of like a for-profit business. Now, since this is how we were born, and we want to make certain that we're true to our founders' intent, that's why Marroquín University will continue having this structure. But as I explained in my presentation, the university is managed pretty much as a business, and we're penny pinchers. We really take care of every single penny we can, and operationally, the students' tuition paid for the operations of the university. In fact, we even run in the black. We even save some money to help us develop, further some of these projects. There are certain investments like the buildings and all that, where we look for donations. Yeah.
Yeah, so a general and then a more specific question. The general question is what's been the experience of your students in getting into graduate schools that sort of don't have this kind of perspective, and then sort of more specifically, what's been the experience of your students getting into economics programs that aren't sort of based on the economics of Mises and Buchanan, but on sort of more mainstream notions of economics that are more math heavy and the like.
Oh.
They got a good education.
Well,
we make them take math here too.
We love for students to come here. Of course. Remember that. Pardon?
There's one at Texas A&M.
Yeah, there's one. Yeah. The courses that you heard of are for, the university at large. There are specific courses, and of course the content of the course is different for the economics school. That they get the macros, the numbers, and the maths. So, and what we have heard so far is that the students have graduated from this program do very well in the graduate programs here in the States. But of course, they come from an economics background from Marroquín University, where they get the Austrian perspective, of course, but all the math and all the macro and all the other stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, so I see one of our
students here who could benefit from something I'm going to suggest here. Kirk, who is you know, a mid-career guy, you know, sort of thinking about sort of what to do with his education, which he loves these ideas and whatnot, you know, and so he's here studying here at Mason, but he also has a life out in Colorado. Which, how do you juggle those things? And one of the things is the development of online programs. And I was wondering how much, and we've seen this development of these online programs even at the best and the brightest schools. So, you know, some Ivy League schools now are offering these kind of things. I gave a talk, I gave a lecture in a class a week and a half ago at Michigan State from Fairfax.
Yeah.
Because I did it on, you know, TV. The students right there, all this stuff like that, it was great. As Don will tell you, George Mason has just developed a relationship with the Higher School of Economics. I had to go to that, you know, that meeting with, you know, Peter Stearns and other people to meet with the faculty there. And they're doing it all. Originally, when they first started talking, we would do faculty swapping. Now they're not talking about faculty swapping, they're talking about faculty imagery, you know, and the big problem is working out the time difference, you know. It'd be 7 o'clock at night over there, and it'd be 7 o'clock in the morning over here, and we'd have to somehow talk to one another. So, or vice versa, you know. So I guess the question is like, are you actively seeking with your network of people here, developing very tight cooperative deals so that you know, these things can kind of be worked out? I give you an example that we're doing here at George Mason, and I don't know if this is official, Don, but the way I understand the way ISIS is going to operate will be that a lot of the students will spend 3 years in residency here and 2 years in Chapman, and they'll have a very tight relationship with one another, you know, in doing those kind of things. And I could envision...
It's not official, but
that's the unofficial ways, but I could envision something like, you know, like with Jocko, if I was to do that process again, I would kind of encourage you guys to have him or that next person spend a year, you know, here with us as a visiting scholar, not necessarily paying tuition or anything. They could pay tuition down there, but be here and go to our classes and interact and everything like that. Or, you know, clearly just, you know, work away or whatever, those kind of things, so that we can, you know, have a development and use the best of those things. I was wondering if you were seeking to develop those kind of partnerships.
Well, definitely, especially with George Mason and all of you.
No, you got to talk to him more later.
But Don knows about it.
Yeah.
In fact, we have sort of like it's not a formal agreement, but it's a collaborative agreement that we had with Don for quite some time. But it'd be wonderful if we could do that. Now, concerning the technologies, we didn't do it for the doctorate program where Jocko comes from, but the MBA program, we've had the opportunity for our students to take the program, you know, virtually or presentially since 1999. We've tested different system. Today we're using WebEx. Maybe you know WebEx. Yeah. And it works very well. And that means that you're taking your MBA at a university, but you have to travel in Central America. You just have to make sure that you have to be back in a hotel or an office to be connected at the same time that you'll be in class. There's something else we've been doing at Marroquín University. I guess some of you have seen it. I'd like to share it with you. In fact, I don't know if it'll work because we tried it earlier on, and I would have to use the other computer. But just let me. That's our web page, and if you visit the new media web page, we have. So you have two types of e-learning. One is synchronous, meaning that you have to be at the same time with the professor using a system like WebEx. The other one is asynchronous. We have over 3,000 hours of video available on our website. And you can think and you can bet. Most of it has to do with classical liberalism. Yeah. And let me see if I can show you. There's Carlos Alberto Montaner.
That's the whole Free to Choose series?
Yeah, the whole Free to Choose series in Spanish.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the university owns the rights, and instead of having it on the library, we have the permission to have it on our website. That's awesome. Complete. You wanna hear? I'm sure you wanna hear Milton Friedman speak Spanish. Now, let's see if we can get the this is the iPencil story. If I get it to work.
One of the things that, just while you're setting that up, one of the things that's really impressed me in the last 6 months is how powerful Russ Roberts' podcasts are with these guys. And from the Russ Roberts podcast, which is really the first podcast I've ever listened to, I then started to look for other ones, and I found this one. University of Chicago Law School is now podcasting. Do you guys know that their lectures in the law? They have a special lecture series in the law school, and you can get the podcast from that. And some of them are like unbelievably great. I mean, it's going to sound strange because I wouldn't necessarily, but Martha Nussbaum has one on religious freedom, which is like ridiculously good. And I mean, you can understand why she's a famous professor just listening to her talk. There's another one by Peter Singer, and that makes you want to puke. But I mean, it is pretty amazing. And I'm thinking that the world is just shifting in front of our eyes. You can have these, great professors, and they give the lecture one place, but it can be all over the place. And then you get TAs, right, which are the recitation sections. And so that would drive down the price of education, and you get a superstar market for lecturers, but you have TAs, who minister the teaching issue. And, we might see the whole world changing very quickly here.
I think I'm not going to be able to do this.
Sorry, I can imagine what he's going to say.
Well, this was this is not the iPencil story. This is different. But I want to show you this software was developed in Guatemala in the year 2001. And what we did is, if we had a better connection, well, it probably could be in Guatemala. I don't think so. Is you are able.
That's probably a GMU.
I'm sorry. And I'll tell you what.
Hi, I'm Mike McClough from Hoover Institution. We're sitting.
Oops.
He froze.
Yeah, he froze. Well, anyways, do you know something different?
Sitting here at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University with Milton and Rose Friedman. They wish that they were with you.
Well, anyways, they wish they were with you on this momentous occasion. This was for the for the Montpellier Society meeting of the year 2002. And what we did is the reason you'll learn just right now, we not only developed this electronic index, so you can have, for instance, we have the Vernon Smith, when we gave him an honorary degree, he gave a wonderful lecture, and we have it completely indexed. So you can go back and forth to the different points of his presentation, video streaming. And this is Guatemalan technology. And here, since you won't be able to listen because there's a little problem with it, I'll bring you to this point, where all of a sudden Milton Friedman starts speaking about the influence of ideas and what Marroquín University has done in Guatemala. Yeah. And since we have a problem with the video, I can show you the transcript of what he was saying. Let me do something. It's a little bit difficult to manage the computer from here. Did you notice that I did a search? I put Guate from Guatamala, so I know where in the video I'll find this. So I'll take this away. He mentions Guatemala there, but that's not the Guatemala I'm looking for. It's the second time that he mentions it. And this coincides with this link. And then all of a sudden, well, you would see Milton Friedman saying, for example, in Guatemala, where some of the members of Montpellier Society organized a private university, Francisco Marroquín University, which has become one of the leading universities in Latin America. No, I think I shouldn't. You can see that I love technology, but anyway. 3,000 hours of video. Getting the ideas across. Oh, there it is.
You may not stay now.
As soon as you go over to turn the speaker on, you'll shut off. This is what you get. 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 This is what But all that you see here is Guatemalan technology. We were doing this in the year 2001. That's 4 years before YouTube started. So I bite my tongue every time I hear that Google paid $1.6 billion for that company.
It says in here you're an entrepreneur and an intellectual. You missed that one.
Definitely.
Should have had a V8.
I'll tell you what. Pretty much focus on what we're doing at Marroqun. We have received emails from professors in Spain who say, we're using your videos all the time because this is a wonderful resource for us, for our students, and of course you're welcome to use it, yes.
Well, I had two rather mundane questions before Peter mentioned my name, but I'll just say that perhaps this is a chance. The social sciences tend to be a little behind the technology schools, and with your degree in electrical engineering, you're familiar with that, in moving out the distance education. And I know this could be a chance where UFM can lead George Mason into that future, because I've been asking for those distance courses on my nose for about 3 years. But I am out here. And I will say, interestingly, my
plan worked.
No, but this is interesting on the technology. But my better half is on the faculty at University of Colorado in Boulder, electrical and computer engineering. I'm an electrical engineer in my prior career.
Good for you.
There's 3 of us. And at any rate, she moved out here with me, and they wanted her to continue teaching those courses. She's been teaching all graduate courses, half her students at a distance for some time. So she's teaching at her townhouse down here, students both asynchronously and asynchronously. 2 classes this term that way. So it works. It's actually done widely in technology. My 2 questions were about UFM. One, the fields. You mentioned doctorate in addition to the medical, dental, and MBAs. What fields do doctorates in? And number 2, what's the language? Obviously, you want to move out and have impact in Latin America, but you also want to be a model that moves out across that language barrier. How's the language work in your school, undergraduate and for the graduate degrees?
Well, I think I did mention in my presentation that all of our students are required a TOEFL examination, so everybody knows English.
So everybody knows English.
Everybody knows English.
The ITA students from Western Guatemala.
Well, we make an exception for them because they come into the university lacking knowledge of English and knowledge of mathematics. And so we know that it takes them a little over 6 months to adapt. It's not 6 months, it's not a semester, it's a little over a semester for them to adapt.
So you teach in English then, pretty
much
exclusively?
To them, only to them. We don't teach to all other students. We just require them to come in with English. Just like North American universities, they had required a TOEFL examination. We require a TOEFL equivalent.
Okay, thank you.
And your doctorate?
It's medical doctorate. The large program is medical doctorate. I mean, it's a very important medicine school in Guatemala and regionally. It has agreements with many excellent universities, including the medical school of Harvard. And every year we have about 15 students from medical school of Harvard visit Marroquín University. They go to a clinic that we have in the rural areas. They learn a lot by visiting, doing field work in Guatemala. And we have a very small, and it's what we want to do there, just very small, very targeted doctorate in economics, which Peter knows and Don knows, and a very small, even smaller program in the law school. So, we don't want to concentrate on, that's what Peter was pointing out, the risks of doing that. So this is just to make sure that we get,
In your doctorate in economics program, is it purely dissertation driven?
It's dissertation.
So a student gets admitted has a proposal and they get admitted. This is more like the European.
It's more like the British.
Yeah. And then they work with faculty.
Exactly.
And what do they work as teachers as well? Like, did Jocko teach classes when he was down there?
He was teaching classes not at the campus because when he was there, we still had the extension of, Quetzaltenango, it's the second largest city. We
So
don't
he
know
went
about
out there.
But he was teaching there with Joe Picasso.
Right.
Giancarlo, what sort of connections do you have to the Guatemalan diaspora community here in the U.S. and to what extent do they provide another base of support for you, both financially and in terms of sending students back home or back to Guatemala?
We with Ricardo, we have mixed feelings about this because if we're putting so much effort into educating Guatemalans. Of course, we want them to stay in Guatemala and help us change Guatemala. But on the other hand, we just cannot have, there's something that all our students, when they graduate, are free to do. And I mean, no, I'm not complaining for them to look for better than themselves. And if we're doing a good job, they'll find opportunities at the places they can find. And of course, the U.S. is the center of attraction for them. Just this morning, we had a meeting with about 15 out of diaspora. It's the first time we do this, and it was a wonderful meeting. It was wonderful for them, a learning experience for us, and it opened our eyes that it took us too long to start doing this. And so now we don't have a program. We just quite a number of ideas that came out this morning.
Were they UFM?
Yeah, they're all UFM alumni, at different ages and from different fields. They're living here in the Washington area. Well, one of them, he drove, and this was a breakfast meeting, and he drove 4 hours to get there. That's how committed he was to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have one other question. Many years ago, there was this group of Cubans that wanted to start the Hayek University in Aveeno, in the post-Castro world. And I think Michael Novak agreed to be, like a thing. Buchanan, I think, might have signed up. They asked Kersner, I know. People talked to me at one time about being somehow like a affiliate faculty. I've never heard anything about it. Did it implode, or did it?
It imploded.
Was it a bad idea to begin with?
No, the idea is wonderful.
No, I meant, was it bad, like the people that were trying to do it?
Okay. Too much talk and too much noise and no action. The idea is wonderful. It's great.
Well, I'm afraid we're out of time this afternoon, so I want to thank Mr. Ibárgüen.